sorry, it's not letting me push the button saying, okay, that it's in progress, but it is in progress. So hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Kavanaugh, City Councillor for Bay Ward. And first of all, I want to welcome you all. This is a meeting about 7080 Woodridge Crescent for a development application. We're here to have the developers give a presentation from Fergus Lee and to answer your questions on it. We'll take questions in the chat, and if there's time, we'll open up the mics. But if we can have them in the chat, might be more efficient, just so we can have exactly what people are asking, and hopefully have fulsome answers for you. So I'll start off with the land acknowledgement. Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce the Fergus Lee team through Sharon Ravnus, who is Vice President of Marketing and Resident Experience. So I'm going to pass it on to Sharon, and she'll introduce the team here on the side of the development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. We're excited to show you the latest iteration of our design. It was almost 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, we showed you the first. We've got a few small tweaks since then. We have myself here to answer questions on behalf of Fergus Lee Accor Village. We have Tyler Yakchuk from Foten and Planners, and Brian Casagrande from Foten as well. We also have David Hardy from BB&M Architects and David Hook from David. What is your actual company again? Because you were a last-minute entry.
Formerly IBI Group. Now it's Arcadis.
Perfect. And Dan Greenberg is on the line too, listening in, the owner of Fergus Lee Properties. And I'm going to hand over to Tyler, who's going to take you through some of the planning side of things.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Barbara, if you wouldn't mind putting the slides up. Okay, so again, welcome everyone for coming. My name is Tyler Yakachuk from Foten Planning and Design, representing Fergus Lee, and we'll be walking you through at least the planning portion of the 70 and 80 Woodridge Crescent design proposal. We'll let Barbara get the slides going again. Okay, so although I'm sure everyone is aware of the site, just a little bit of background context. So on the left, you can see the whole of the Accor Village land properties. At the bottom south, identified in green, is 70 and 80 Woodridge, right beside the Cobalt, which is also roughly about center of your screen. You can see the recent updates done by it. And just to the right of it, or the east rather, is 100 Woodridge, a recently approved development of, I believe, 30 and 27 or 28 story towers. And of course, with the rapid transit station abutting, as well as many amenities such as the shopping center. Next slide. So getting a little closer in on the site, you can see the subject property of today, again, beside the Cobalt and 100 Woodridge. I'd like to point out on the right side, highlighted, you can see the proposed floor area for the buildings at 70 and 80 Woodridge at about 790 square meters, which relative to our neighbors on either side is a fair bit smaller, which will represent a much smaller shadow casting across the rest of the Fergus Lake property as the shadow moves through the sky. Next slide, please. So discuss the project timeline and where we've started and getting to where we are today and moving forward. This started, the very first formal meeting happened in June 2021, although conversations between Fergus Lee and consultants had been happening many years prior to that. It was at this meeting where city staff would have had their first opportunity to review initial concepts as well as provide the required list of studies that we needed to be undertaken. And as Sharon mentioned, over 2 years ago now, we had our first public meeting where we provided the initial design, similar to the one seen right here. And then formally submitted all of our studies and design work in March of 2022. We received our first review of our application in May of that year. Concerns at that point were relatively slight. There was a little bit of an issue or concern pertaining to the proximity of the tower fronting Woodridge relative to 100 Bayshore, as well as a bit of landscape questions, which we'll get to in a second. We resubmitted and found and got our second round of technical circulation comments in January of 2023, which again, tower location and landscape were city's concerns. In the interim between January and September of 2023, Fergus Lee brought on a landscape architecture consultant to provide further landscape design fulsomeness and ideally eliminate any of the concerns city staff would have with the viability of the landscape strategy. We went to the Urban Design Review Panel in September of 2023, which is where a team of designers not involved with this project review projects in specific areas of interest to the city. They were generally supportive of the heights, the locations of buildings. They were quite impressed with the landscape plan, at which point we made our final submission to the city. And at the request of the councillor, scheduled this public meeting to give you a sense of what we will be providing to planning committee, which we ultimately anticipate going to at the end of April or possibly the beginning of May. Next slide. So if we could go on to the next slide. Okay. So the development applications that we provided the city at their request was first an official plan amendment to remove this site, much like our neighbors of 100 Bayshore, from the requirement to have a secondary plan undertaken in advance of any future development. We believe that this site is very unique versus the rest of the Akora Village property, and therefore wasn't necessarily required or shouldn't be necessarily required to go through that same review, given that this was a greenfield site versus the redevelopment of the rest of the area, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property from its existing zoning to a zone that would be more appropriate to the type of development that we're contemplating. Next slide. So getting into why we feel that the design is appropriate given the City of Ottawa's policies, we'll look at the official plan and you'll note that the property is in an area designated as a hub. These are areas that the city has decided are areas of specific first proximity to rapid transit and areas specific to greater levels of density or intensity, sorry. And specifically, the closer we are to rapid transit stations, the more height and intensification they anticipate. And given that we are abutting a rapid transit station, the maximum 40-story height limit we felt was appropriate for the site. Also, given that the area has an evolving neighborhood overlay, it would indicate that the city foresees this area as having an eventual ramp up in intensification. another reason why we thought the design we're contemplating is appropriate. Next slide, please. So again, looking at the existing zoning, it was designed, or the zoning was more in line with the Cobalt and was provided at the time that that building was designed, which is no longer appropriate considering both the time we live in now, the new official plan, and what we're contemplating. So as such, we are going to be looking to rezone the property a general mixed use, similar to next door, as well as have specific zoning provisions such as height and some setbacks, or amending some setbacks to work with our specific design. Next slide. So getting more into the design specifically, the development statistics are, we're looking to provide 2 towers, one of 40 stories fronting Woodridge, and
Sorry about that.
yeah, no worries. And then at the south of the property, 37-story tower. The unit counts are flexible at this point because the unit mixes have not been set, but there is a general range of between low 500s to high 500s. And as I already noted, the typical floor plate is relatively small at 789 square meters. There'll be about 4 levels of parking are contemplated at this point, with a parking rate in and around 0.8 stalls per unit. And now I'll hand it off to Derek to go over a more fulsome review of the design.
Thank you, Tyler. You can go to the next slide, please. I think that levels of parking is actually incorrect. I think we only have 2 levels of parking, but underneath both towers, so there's 4 areas, I think is what that meant to say. But what I'm going to do, I'm Derek Hardy from BBB Architects Ottawa, and we've worked with FOTEN many times on developments like this, and with Fergus Lee on a few of the projects within the village, so we're quite familiar with the neighborhood. And this is just an aerial site plan to show how the landscape has evolved since we started. I just want to walk you quickly through some of the strategies, and then we'll open up to your questions and answers after that. Next, please. I'm not going to go through all the planning decisions behind it, but I just wanted to know that we are looking at a few high-level principles, that this site has to be a gateway and an ambassador to the village. It connects the LRT station through this property to the rest of Cora Village, and so it becomes a front door and a common area for most of the community. We're trying to put the urban design first and scale the front low buildings down to something that suits Woodridge Street, and have the towers themselves rise out of a lower podium. And this has been supported by the city as we've been discussing the extent of podium, but they like the idea of keeping a lower 4-story or 2-story podium and 2 stories above, closer to the street. And as I mentioned, the connectivity is important because it goes also to other residential buildings, and as well to the LRT, Bayshore, et cetera, and a new development to our east. And lastly, we're trying to prioritize the public realm and make this that it is really about the green space first, and have the towers sit quietly in the background. So, next, please. The site's quite an odd shape, and that's partly why the positioning of the towers is, but to the left of us is the existing Cobalt building. To the right are the 2 new buildings from 100 Bayshore, and you can see the LRT is just in the bottom, literally adjacent to us in the southeast. Next, please. And this was just to talk about the setbacks. I don't think we need to go through this with this crowd, but with the city, we've been working on exactly what the proper setbacks are. And if you go to the next slide, please, you can see that the north setback is trying to be a good neighbor on Woodridge, and actually not provide a suburban setting, but start to take more of a semi or an exurbia or urban setting to it. So it's more of a traditional sidewalk with a smaller forecourt and retail right up on the street. Next, please. And the main change since the last time that we were here was to really develop this courtyard as a much more significant public realm and garden with a bit of a forest edge protecting it, and really try to present something that's of a significant stature to suit the entry to Cora Village. Next, please. This is just a view from down low with the Cobalt on the right and the podium, to show you the idea that there's a 2-story podium and then another 1 or 2 significant stories above that before we get into the tower. So the idea is that this whole tower, this project would sit comfortably on the ground, and the tower would rise out behind, slightly set back from the front buildings. Next, please. And these are all early designs. I should qualify that we probably have a little more rendering and detail prepared in this because of the city's questions than we would typically do at a zoning level, but it is the design intent of where we're headed with the project. So there are, as I mentioned, there's only 2 levels of parking below grade, although there's 2 under the one tower and 2 under the other in phases with a ramp down the middle. So on the right, what you're looking at, the gray box, is the Cobalt building. And then the grid on the right is all of our parking, which eats up most of the property, but we have a large 1.5 meter landscape berm on top of it. So we can plant trees and landscape and trail any position on top of the parking garage. And it can be phased, as I mentioned, with the blue arrows showing you go north into one garage and south into the other. There's no driveway directly onto the street. It uses the existing Akora Village driveway that serves the Cobalt as well. So the amount of frontage remains the same as uninterrupted along Woodridge. Next, please. Just the podium again from the side to show that we're trying to put a human scale to the lower parts of the building and then have the tower rise out of the podium. Next, please. The reason we've staggered the buildings in this way is not a typical arrangement we would do, partly because of the site, but we pushed them as far to the north and the west as we can to maximize the distance between the towers. It is a very small footprint, as Tyler had mentioned. We call it like a pinpoint tower or point tower. The idea is that it makes a small, taller shadow and that moves quickly across, as opposed to the Cobalt or something that has much larger slab, and that would move. We've also kept it close to the street with the north tower to offset from 100 Bayshore so that we have views across and we don't stare directly into their balconies. And similarly, we offer them views from their western facade into our new garden space and public realm. Next, please. That's just a view. It's really important. We realized as we drove up the 416 that this site is almost axial to the on-ramp as you leave the 416 to the 417. And so not only is it a gateway from the LRT into Akora Village, it is a bit of an identifier and skyline gateway for the whole city coming up from this end, not to mention for improving the brand of Akora Village. This is a new model for Akora to develop, and it's certainly going to be tall, but it is a fully rental place, so it supports the original concept and the purpose of Akora Village. Next, please. This is an aerial rendering in between the 2 towers showing the extent of landscape. So to the south and west, we're planning to put a small forest edge that would help screen it from the buses and that. But also next to the building, you see the lighter purple trees. They've been calling that the spine. That's sort of a zone where you separate the public realm from the more private, somewhat proprietary space for the people who live in the building, where the green lawn and the forecourt and the water court and the white benches for seating would all be public realm connecting the LRT into Akora Village. Next, please. And this is just a couple sketches. I really enjoyed working with WAA. This is the 3rd project we've done with them from Montreal, our landscape architects. And they really bring a really human or humane or both quality to the development. So the connectivity is important, getting you to the mall and to the transit and down to the creek to the southwest. So next, they're pretty quick sketches, so we can go kind of quickly through these. The gap between the buildings, they felt this spine was really important because if we are going to make it a public realm or a public space, we also have to make sure there's spaces for the tenants that they feel like they are welcome to come down and have picnics or sit outside and not feel like you're just sitting in a public park. So the spine is the piece that divides the active public spaces from the more proprietary zone for the tenants. Next, please. That's just a view again, now that you've seen it, to understand the spine is the kind of gray arc going north and curving to the right, and the green space is all public, where the smaller zones next to the building that have the green and brown landscape are the more proprietary terrace spaces. Next, please. And the landscape isn't flat. So what we've done, I mentioned there's 1.5 meters of coverage, and they're taking advantage of that by stepping down where we can, where we don't need the depth for deep tree root balls, and then have it burn back up. It also helps assist with gathering the rainwater and slowing down the stormwater management as it goes off the site. Next, please. And this is one of the renderings taken again. This is from the opposite corner between the 2 towers looking back towards LRT. So you can see the yellow spine through the middle, or the yellow walkway through the middle is the public walkway from the LRT through our site, where the white curving walkway going from the left to the right closest to us is the spine that's the sort of perimeter boundary. The rest is a water park, or proposing a children's play area, possibly with a splash pad, and a little bit of an amphitheater or band shell for spontaneous events. The lawn could be used for throwing frisbees or just sitting, having picnics outside for anybody on the public. Next, please. And this connectivity diagram on the left, as scribbly as it is, we just felt it was an important diagram to suggest that while there are two important entries to the tower, the rest of the movement has to be able to cut across the site and somehow be protected. Because we are very close to the highway and close to the LRT station, the ground level experience has to be sort of buffered from the noise and traffic. Next, please. And so I think we've tried to achieve the goals. And after talking to the city, we'd set out some objectives from the first meeting. And I think now we're actually providing a proper, urban contribution to the neighborhood. We're making it as a proper framed gateway and creating a more meaningful public realm, not just having a space between the buildings as grass you can go out on, but enhancing it with more landscaping than a typical developer would do. I think Acora Village and Dan Greenberg have been very supportive of the concept so far, and I think it's going to make a difference and probably set a new standard for the rest of the landscape development going on as Acora continue to improve their buildings. We're obviously allowing connectivity. There's no reason to restrict it. In fact, the safety for these kind of public spaces is counting on people moving through the site regularly and recognizing that it has a significant role to play for the whole city as an axial view commit before 16. Next, please. And that's about all I have, the same rendered view from above. But if you have any further questions, Tyler and I are available, as well as Fergus Lee. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. If there are questions on the presentation or on the development overall, you can put them in the chat, and we'll read them out.
Sorry, Counselor, if you can give me one more second. It was noted to me that, sorry, Counselor, on our landscape plan that we had included trees on our next door neighbor 100 Bayshore in their drive aisle. I just want to note to everyone present to not give them the wrong impression that we are implementing any items on our next door neighbor's site.
Okay. We have one question here, and that is, how many years will all the different builders' buildings take to be completed? I guess they can only speak for themselves, but if not for 100 Bayshore. Do you want to take that, Tyler?
Sure. I mean, maybe Sharon has a better idea, but I know that in terms of next steps after assuming that everything goes well with the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment, we're still needing to go for site plan control, which as far as Fergus Lee has led us to believe is not something they're actively pursuing in the short term. So with regards to with regards to this project, at least in the short term, there is no timeline for the development, although Sharon can talk to the medium and long term perhaps, but nothing in the short term.
That is correct. Exactly what you said. We have got no immediate plans. Even if we did have the plans, as Tyler said, we've got a lot of next steps to go through. And currently our land is being used by LRT construction. So we have to wait till the LRT is actually finalized before we can move forward as well.
And that will be the end of 2026 on paper. I expect Fairgate would be 2027 to be fair. But that is the dates that aren't officially out there. I think I saw a question from Kate about 100 Bayshore, and yes, it was approved a number of years ago. They were approved just as the pandemic got going, and because of that, they had many delays, as many projects have across the city. They have written to us and It's related to the whole issues of finding workers, supply chain, and very typical problems right now, as well as the interest rates have changed. But they are starting to move ahead a bit more, and but I haven't gotten any dates of construction. Again, because of the stage 2 LRT, it is a pinch point there, with a brand new station being built. Rather awkward to have several construction projects going on at the same time. So I expect that they'll wait till the majority of the LRT construction is done. And let's be honest, that's part of the reason they're there, is because of the LRT. So they would want to see it close to operation to take advantage of it. Do we have a next question? I see one from Lucas, but did I miss one? Hold on. Oops, there we go. Can you show the shadow effects on the surrounding neighborhoods? That is on the dev app file, but do you want to bring that up? Do you have it handy?
Barbara, I can take that one maybe, if you want to put the slideshow back up, please. I'd loaded them after I know that they had said this might come up, so we just loaded the slides. There have been, we have to provide shadow studies as part of our application. So every 2 hours, it's right after the thank you slide, I think. We have to provide as part of our submission to city. They require us to provide every 2 hours at the spring and fall together as one, and then the summer and winter equinox as the other, or solstice at the other. So we put these in. I just extracted a couple, or we decided to show you a few of them just to give an idea. So, thank you, Barb. The way the city does the new shadow study, or requests the shadow studies, is that we show the shadows you're allowed to do as of right, and then you superimpose the shadows of your project because you're doing a rezoning for different heights. So this currently has a 34 meter, or people's heads are in the way of my own notes, but 34 meter height for about 12-story building, which is in blue. And so at 37 and 40 stories, we're about 3 times the height of the zoning. But you are also allowed to build to full property. So the next slide shows it in plan, where if we were to take the whole property at 12 stories and June, I just have to move my thing, June 21st at 10 in the morning, the towers to the right, we did put in the 100 Bayshore towers just for comparison, and the Cobalt to the left is obviously existing. So this would be the shadow as of right. And the next slide shows, I think at the same time, June 21st, 10 a.m. with our 2 towers. So basically what the city wants to know is the area that has a kind of darkest gray blue and an orange outline on it is the difference between what we're allowed to do and what our proposal is requesting. If you click to the next one, the shadows are just going to move around. So at June 21st at 1:30, and this is sort of the middle of the summer, just past noon, you can see the shadows from 100 Bayshore and our 7080 Woodridge at the same time. Next slide, please. And again, the blue is the as of right, what we're allowed to do. Obviously in the spring, early in the morning, the sun's much lower, so the shadows go to the northwest, stretch a lot longer. The blue actually covers half of Cobalt, and then the extension is to the top left. Next, please. As you move around the same time of year in the spring and fall, obviously they have the same sun pattern. By sort of a later afternoon sun where the shadows are starting to get long again, it goes to the northeast. Ours are kind of going parallel to the 100 Bayshore tower. Next, please. And then finally, in the middle of December, even at high noon, there's not much you can do in Ottawa. The sun is at such a low angle that any building, the Cobalt to the left stretches across the road, and our towers and 100 Bayshore all will reach across the road and across the buildings just for a period. But again, as point towers, the whole purpose of designing small floor plates is, if we put this in an animation, you would see the towers that are far apart. They move when they get to this angle, they get close together, and then they move by. So if they are shadowing somebody's yard, they should be shadowing the yard for not the entire day, but for a few hours of the day. I think that's all I had for this round.
Thank you. I don't know if you've got the wind study handy there, because the next question is on the studies on winds around the building.
Tyler, you
Is
want to do
there,
that one?
sure, is there
There's no
the
graphic
chat
for
up.
it.
Yeah. Is
No,
there a specific question or just how did the wind study go?
have there been any studies on wind around the
Oh.
building? The answer is yes. It's under the dev apps, which we can put the link for people in. If I can ask Barb to help follow on that. And that gives all the different studies that are done for the application, and wind study is one of them. It's a report.
I will note that in the report that you'll read, if you just read the sort of executive summary, they'll note that for the most part, most of the site is perfectly suitable to be lingering in most of the year. They did note a couple locations and instances where it is less hospitable, but that these could be mitigated through landscape strategies and the built form as we move through the next stage of development. But primarily our landscape strategy will mitigate any of those concerns noted in the wind study.
Okay. If there's any specific questions, please let us know, Linda. Kate is asking what kind of secondary planning will be required to for the rest of Akora Village. Well, you can go ahead, Tyler, but
Sure.
generally speaking, that's a city function of the official plan, and there was not a secondary plan done for Bayshore.
Yes, exactly. So at the moment, there is no ongoing study for a secondary plan in this area. There's a couple in and around the area in your ward, but nothing specific to this site. However, there is a site-specific policy that was in the old OP and has been carried over to the new one that looks for a site-specific area plan for primarily the Fergus Lee landholding area, which hasn't started yet. Is something that Fergus Lee is contemplating at the moment, but it will be I don't want to say led by the consultants, but it will definitely be a combination of city staff and consultants working their way through that when that starts. Hasn't started yet, but in the future, that's how it will be undertaken.
Lucas is asking, is there proposed to be a junior and senior playground in the amenity area?
I can probably answer that one. We don't have the final plans yet. We do realize, because we've got a lot of kids in our neighborhood already, we do need a junior and a senior playground to entertain them all. So as and when the final designs come, I'm sure we'll be accommodating both ends of the age groups there for sure.
Okay, thank you. Diane, the surrounding community has expressed extensive community example. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that's a question or if that's a statement. If you can rephrase that, because I'm not understanding what you're trying to say. If that would be helpful. Thank you. Hold on. Just okay, there we are. We have difficulty sending our comments via chat. Would it be possible to open the chat line for opportunities to express our comments verbally? Yes, but we'll get through the chat first and at the end, if that's okay. Because there tends to be many questions that are the same. Okay, thank you. And we have the link to the application details. I call that Dev App. That was a short form for development applications. Okay, Kate, I don't see a question in there. Are you asking a question about the planning rationale? If you can put it in the form of a question, you've made a statement, and but I'd like to know what the question is. In terms, you're talking about the view, but if you can put in the form of the question, because these are the developers, that would be helpful. Okay. Sorry, my function is is that the last one? I think that's the last one.
Nope, there are a couple more, actually.
There are a couple more? Okay.
Let me help here. So Kate actually had a question previous to that. It says here, is city staff completely satisfied that there will be no problems with stormwater management and erosion to the properties downstream on Graham Creek from these 4 towers?
Okay, thank you.
Sure, I can handle that. So I don't want to speak for 100 Woodridge, other than to say for both developments, as part of the development application process, we would have required civil engineering studies that would have required to make sure that all stormwater management is handled on your own site so that there's no runoff that goes to anybody else's site. And I have to assume, given that they got site plan approval, that they were satisfied on that site. With regards to 70 and 80 Woodridge, we've had 3 rounds of technical reviews, which have not indicated that there are any issues with our stormwater management strategy. As well with erosion, we will have had to have undertaken geotechnical studies, again, that the city accepted, reviewed, and had no issues with. So as far as the city is concerned, our studies have proven that there will be no water runoff anywhere other than to our site, and that erosion will not be an issue on the creek.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize. My chat was stuck and I couldn't move it, so I didn't see some of the questions. Is city planning staff completely satisfied? There were no problems. Okay, we got that one. What kind of amenities are being proposed to be included as part of the development for residents? This is from Lucas.
I can answer that one. We're hoping to include a lot of the amenities that we currently feel are missing in the community, like doctors' surgeries, physiotherapists, nursery schools, gyms, yoga classes, yoga studios, sorry, something like that, small cafes, something that would really enhance our current residents and future residents, and also people moving back and forth between the LRT station and Woodruff Drive.
Another part of the question, thank you very much. Kate was asking, have you thought about the view from the hill from Canada? And another question is, why can you bury the parking where the neighborhood development couldn't?
I'm not sure what the neighborhood development is referring to. Sharon, you might know the community a bit better.
I think they're talking about 100 Bayshore, that their parking garage above the ground rather than below the ground. That was their choice. I don't think it's they couldn't do it. I think it was.
I can speak to that. I know generally, I don't want to speak to 100 Bayshore or the sort of urban design strategies that planners at the city were employing at the time, but I know generally now the urban designers at the city typically don't like having parking above grade. To be fair, there is no policy in the official plan or zoning bylaw that prohibits it. It's just a certain aesthetic that city staff prefer. And with regard to our design, by putting it underground, it gives us more opportunity to put more units in more stalls above grade. So I'm not sure the strategy for 100 Woodridge, but for us, it was just a matter of maximizing units within the building footprint that we were presented.
It's very difficult for this developer to talk about another developer's strategy. So we can bring it back to the contacts for 100 Bayshore and get you a fulsome answer from them. How's that?
Counselor, if I could add to that, perhaps, maybe in order to achieve the landscape and make public realm, we really didn't have an option. So not only we had to bury the parking, which is a significant cost, but also we had to bury it enough to get a significant amount of landfill on top of the parking structure, so we can actually grow a real tree root ball and have significant landscape, not just grasses and sedum. So I think it's all part of a conscious decision to make this 2 towers with a beautiful garden. It is supposed to be the gateway to Cora Village, and I think we just really wanted to celebrate it. And Fergus Lee have been behind this, or have been actually leading us to to develop the property this way. I can't speak to the neighbor's property and how they got away with 2 stories above grade either, but
Okay, thank you. Kate gives a compliment for your great landscaping on last year's red, gold, and lime green gardens. They were great. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. I will let Alex, our gardener, know. Thanks.
Okay. Diane's asking if you've considered the buildings are directly on the flight path of migratory birds as well as air navigation flight pathways.
So I guess 2 things here. First, with regard to birds, there are, of course, bird safe guidelines for design measures when building buildings at this height. When you're at the zoning phase, you don't necessarily contemplate these sorts of measures as much. But I anticipate that this would be something that would be more looked at during the site plan phase as design evolves. And with regards to airplanes, the schedule, can't remember the schedule off the top of my head, but in the official plan, they identify areas of the city where height is limited due to your proximity to the airport. And the Accor Village area is well outside of that zone. So the airport doesn't identify this area as an area of concern with regards to the height of buildings.
Lucas is asking that it's great that there's lots of vegetation as part of the development. Would there be sufficient sunlight to reach all proposed vegetation so they will survive long term? Will there be a watering plan for the vegetation?
I can try that one if you want, Sharon.
Sure.
That the landscape obviously is facing mostly south and east. The towers are to the north and west of the property. So yes, it takes advantage of it, gets full morning sun across the garden. But secondarily, the extra soil on top of the parking garage, the whole idea is to treat it as it retains rainwater. It doesn't send it off into the sewers immediately. And so by keeping a moist ground plane, as we showed in section, that they're going to try to drop and capture most of the rainwater at the bottom of the seating area. It'll keep it in the lawn and areas to allow natural irrigation and really minimize the amount of watering we have to do. We're also we will be using all sustainable planting. And that's part of our site plan control as we submit a full plant list to ensure that these are low maintenance plant material.
Okay. Thank you. Is there possibility from Kate of getting a convenience store with milk, fruit, vegetables like the drugstores have? And yes, I think I agree they would do well.
I think so too. They would do very well. Again, it's very early days, but something like that would hopefully see in there. Yes.
It's something I certainly would love to see myself.
Yeah.
There was a time, of course, when Bayshore was a food desert until Walmart came in, and that was not great. And they actually had to bring in school bus full of vegetables to sell to local people. So I don't want to see those days again. That's for sure. I think Walmart should have some competition. So appreciate it. Okay, Diane would like to ask about the adequate assessment of the stormwater management as evidenced by surrounding flooding. Could you provide us with whatever study has been done?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the surrounding area other than this specific site, but Councillor, as you noted on DevApps, the development application site, the stormwater management strategy will be present on that site or on that website. So if they want to look, it will be right there. And I know it's rather technical jargon, but the executive summary gives a pretty good layman terms assessment of their strategy.
Yeah, I recall going through the process and getting the exact same questions for 100 Bayshore, and information was received on the storage of water. Kate's asking about 3-bedroom units being possible. And yes, many developments go for 1 bedroom. Are you looking at larger units?
Absolutely. We're going to have a mixture because we do have one of the lucky landlords in the city that do have current 3-bedroom units in quite a lot of our high rises. So we'll be doing a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. That's decided at the next stage at site plan, the actual makeup of the buildings.
Thank Could the height of both buildings be reduced? Diane.
But I guess that's ultimately up to Fergus Lee as to what heights they want, with regards to what is appropriate given the policy of the official plan. As I noted in the presentations, that this is located in an area, first, extremely close to rapid transit. It abuts it. And second, it's in an area that's been designated for larger levels of intensification. So this specific site meets pretty much the criteria for, I don't want to say maximum intensification, but a large level of intensification. And the heights that are being proposed are within we're not asking for anything that the official plan doesn't suggest is appropriate for the site. So while I can't speak to Fergus Lee's intentions with regards to our professional planning opinion, these sorts of heights are appropriate given the planning policy.
Tyler, if I can just add to that as well, it's Brian also from FOTEN. I mean, two considerations or one factor in the consideration. Firstly, the zoning amendment that we're in the official plan amendment that we're seeking here will set a maximum height. So as Tyler mentioned, it doesn't preclude someone from building less. And sometimes there are reasons why developers choose to do so. So that's a possibility. It's not out of the question relative to what the applications are that we're going forward with. Secondly, from a planning perspective, in addition to all the policy considerations Tyler mentioned, I think it's no secret that the city of Ottawa is trying to figure out every opportunity to achieve additional housing and additional units given the housing crisis that we're in. And so from my perspective as a planner, I look at this location as a place where there's not too many as appropriate as this. I mean, you have such a supportive community and infrastructure around it. The site is relatively isolated in terms of impacts on independent low-rise communities, and it's right on the doorstep of a transit station. So I think from a policy perspective and a developer's perspective and a planner's perspective, this is a site where we should try and maximize height and density as much as we can.
Thank you. By the way, thanks, Barb. She's put in the chat about the adequacy of service study, which includes the stormwater management. So you can read it there. Thank you very much. Will you be using bird-friendly window design? It's from Brenda.
I can do that one, probably, Sharon, Councillor. It is now, we follow CSA, so all of our projects, especially when we have glass or curtain wall, they require a bird-friendly fritz. It's by CSA standards, it's up to 16 meters. So everything from the podium up will have a fine dot pattern, as you'll see on pretty well every commercial project and residential project these days. It is a part of the CSA standard, and the city has adopted most of those policies.
Okay, thank you. Linda's asking, will the retail office space be rental, or is the developer considering selling them as condo units?
It will be all rental. We're not considering selling anything.
Okay, and that includes the residential units are going to be rental. Thank you. Yeah, just see if I've got anything. Have you considered the impact on surrounding infrastructure, i.e. Enterhaven Park, roads, recreation, and Woodridge Crescent? And why not consider low-rise density?
Sure.
David, do you want to touch on, does David or Tyler want to touch on that?
Sure,
David,
I can
if you want
touch
to
on.
handle it.
Yeah. In terms of roadway infrastructure, the transportation impact assessment doesn't just look at cars. It looks at considerations for all modes. And as we know, this is a transit-oriented development, and the vast majority of people coming and going from this building will be by non-auto modes, mostly transit, and a high percentage also of pedestrian and cyclists as well. The TIA, or Transportation Impact Assessment, does look at the roads and intersections in proximity to the development, and does comment on what's called the multimodal level of service, which evaluates conditions for other road users, transit, pedestrians, cyclists, and even trucks. It's all, a lot of the different users have trade-offs. They all have competing needs in some cases, so it's all about balance. And so in many cases, the results of the multimodal level service analysis are based on the existing built form. And over many decades, Ottawa was built up in a very auto-centric environment. But now things are shifting more towards consideration for other roadway users. And so the TIA report does go on and look at each of those modes for Woodridge Crescent, for Bayshore Drive, and other intersections nearby, and makes recommendations to the City of Ottawa as to how things can be improved for these other users, but not necessarily as a trigger from this development application, just in general, how things can be improved through future infrastructure improvements.
Thank you. We have a question about car share. Thanks, Lucas. Great question. It's a good one to ask. Are you considering car share for those who do not have a car?
I absolutely love that question because we're already doing it. So we actually started this about 3-4 months ago. We've got Common Auto. We've got 2 cars at the moment we're testing out. They're flying out the door, so we're just about to expand it even more in our current high rises. So absolutely, Lucas will be doing that in the future. Great.
And thank you for that. And Barb has put in the transportation impact assessment in. Will there be barrier-free accessible units be included in the towers?
Again, it'll be the next stage at site design, but absolutely, because we get requests all the time currently in our current community for that too.
Okay, great. I think I've used up the questions in the chat. If it's okay, I'm going to ask a question. How affordable will the units be? And are you considering designated affordable units?
Probably can't answer the first one because it's a few years off, so I won't know the actual price of the rents in the future, but absolutely consider affordable units. At the next stage, we'll be working with yourself and the city to figure out how many units that will be out of the total amount.
Okay, but will there be designated affordable units?
Yes, there will be.
Okay, like that. We did have an arrangement with 100 Bayshore for 30 affordable units. I'm sure you can beat that.
We will try.
Thank you very much. If anyone feels that they haven't had a question answered, we've gone through quite a few. I can let you put up your hand. I need the little hand signal so that I can see it visibly from the screen. And Barb can help me because sometimes it doesn't show all the little squares at once. But if anyone wants to put up their hand, Diane, would you still feeling you need a question asked? You were asking about that.
Yes.
Oh, there's Bill. I think that's Bill, not Diane.
Yes.
Go for
Okay.
Go for it,
All
Bill.
right. All right. We put extensive effort in the community into opposing the next door towers, if you'll recall, certainly on the height. We had a committee set up. We had an architect. We showed how you could achieve the density consistent with the transportation and the LRT objectives for the city. And I thought we responded very, very well to that. And however, our feedback seemed to just fall on deaf ears. It was the most frustrating process I think I've ever been through here. And I'm hoping somehow that, Teresa, that you could perhaps all our notes are in your files. As our representative, if you could represent our views in the community here and oppose this project. I just think the height here, this Bayshore, as you know, went to the Supreme Court of Canada because of the density when it started. And there's no question that the density that we have there now with the towers that are already planned meet the city's density requirements around LRT. It's not like we have flat land with no one on it. I think there's a very good response in terms of density to the LRT objectives here. And I'm hoping somehow that we can reduce the density in the community. We feel it, notwithstanding what was said a moment ago about the studies, and there's a huge flooding problem. I haven't looked at the latest analysis, but we see it behind our homes. We see Andrew Hayden Park, and Teresa, you would recognize this fully on weekends. It's over.
Bill, do you have a question in there?
Yes, my question is, would you represent our community and oppose this project?
I'm not going to give you an answer on that right now, but frankly, we need units. We need more places for people to live, and we can't continue with what the situation is now. I know you proposed your own proposal to 100 Bayshore, but frankly, the developer had a proposal. It goes to the city planning, and then it goes to council. We'll look at the final draft, but if it's just because there's lots of units, I will not be opposing it.
Well, Teresa, the issue of housing, we all understand and support that initiative the city has. But the city, what I see happening here is that councillors simply respond to developers' requests here instead of looking at the enormous vacant land in the city right now. There's huge tracts of land where we can put housing. There was a great article in the newspaper about developing Bank Street, which is a mess. So there's lots of solutions to the housing problem. And I just see that you're pushing this problem on top of communities who, residents of Ottawa, who invested probably made their biggest investment in homes, and you're making degrading the quality of living that we have in our communities by these enormous towers. It's just it doesn't make any sense. It puts a stress on everything here.
Thanks, Bill. I'm waiting for the staff report as well. We need to see that. They will be looking through all the aspects of the reports, and I haven't seen it yet, so I'll wait to see what they have to say as well. Thank you. Lucas?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can I ask a couple questions, or is it just one at a time?
One at a time.
Okay. First off is what is the standard of like the environmental for the building, like it's gonna be very environmentally friendly, the building with about standard of being environmentally is for the building, but leave the gold, or I'm not sure what it's called, but it's what is it going to be the standard?
I think they'll have the gist of it. Thanks.
Well, Lucas, we're quite, as we mentioned already, we're quite a ways out from ultimately building the building. We still have to go through site plan control, as well as building permits. However, I would anticipate by that phase, the city's high performance design standards will have come into effect, which definitely improve the performance standards relative to environmental protection. So I would anticipate that, well, they will by necessity follow the high performance design standards and build, relative to today's standards, a building that is far more environmentally friendly than what we are presently seeing. Which
also saves money, because when you have it more efficient, then it's less costly.
I believe Dan might have a more fulsome response.
You can rest assured from the owner of the community, of the Aurora Village community, that the new buildings will be built. They will be leaders in sustainability. You have my word.
Thanks, Dan. you have a second question, Lucas? Are you good?
It was kind of a second part of that, my tree question, that I understand. I heard about that it can be that there's enough sunlight, and with the water, like minimize watering because of the absorption of the soil and stuff like that. But particularly the little wedged area between the tower next to Woodridge and the road, it's right behind the tower, and I don't think there's the odds of how much sunlight that's gonna get. If it's gonna, those trees that are planted right over there won't, even if they get water, they need sunlight, and is that gonna die? Are they gonna survive there, or it just, if I make a clarification, if you want a good greenery there to make it more presentable for in front of the building and stuff like that. So if I can get an explanation for that, that would be great.
Okay, Derek.
As I mentioned at the beginning, the WA landscape architects from Montreal are joining us for a third project in a row, and this is their specialty. So what they'll be doing is selecting plant material for the position on the property. They are the ones who are trying to get a buffer because, as you're aware, 100 Bayshore not only has above grade parking, it also has surface parking and asphalt out front, none of which is particularly sustainable. So with our soft landscaping, we're holding the water on property, and we do want to make sure the plant material survives. So they'll be picking the appropriate plant material where it goes between the buildings and the area you're concerned with. But as I said, it faces east and south, so I don't think we could have a better orientation to have almost any type of landscape that's indigenous to the Ottawa area.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thanks, Lucas. Okay, we're just after 8 o'clock, if anyone still has questions, they can send it to us and we'll be happy to forward them. You will note that there is no city staff here. We can't have a city staff person because it's they're still writing their report, so they're not allowed to come to a public meeting until they've got their report written. And so we will be hearing from them. So they will, what they do is they write the report to go to Planning Committee. And it should be noted that Planning Committee is considered the public meeting. However, I always insist on having a meeting like this so that you can talk directly to the developers beforehand. And of course, this will be repeated at Planning Committee, though at Planning Committee, the way it works is you make a presentation. You can't ask questions directly, though councillors can on your behalf. So that is the process. And we'll be waiting to see what dates we have coming up for that. And so if you have any further questions, please let us know. We'll forward it to the developers or city staff, depending on what type of question you have. So we appreciate you coming out. It is big changes for the area. Again, we saw changes with 100 Bayshore. We're seeing more changes here. This is around a transit station. This is something that we need. As many of you know, I'm chair of Ottawa Community Housing. I'm watching the housing market all the time. I know how badly we need housing, especially affordable housing. And that's something that's very important to me. And I know that many of you are aware of that. Okay, well, thank you for everyone. Thank you, Sharon, Derek, Tyler, Dan, and the whole gang for coming out and answering our questions. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, everyone, for asking questions, and they were very thoughtful questions. Really appreciate it. And as soon as we have dates, we'll absolutely have it in our newsletter. So don't worry, Kate. We won't let you be without that knowledge.
Yeah. Kate, if I were to hazard a guess based on talking to planning staff at the city, I would say probably May. But don't hold me to that.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your turnout and have a great rest of your evening.